Hey guys, and welcome to episode 5 of the Inventory Remake series. This video gets even more hefty than the last, but we'll cover the item selection system in the inventory, displaying the extra information for the currently selected item, and we'll also get started on the equipping to hotbar portion, getting through most of that system aside from some bugs and adjustments we'll need to make in the next episode. Speaking of bugs and adjustments, me and the channel members who have tested the completed system so far have found various different bugs with the system, and so I would like to mention them now and just say I'll cover how to fix them in the final episode of this series. So if you have issues with any of the following, you can either try fixing these bugs yourself as you go, or you can wait until the final episode where I show how. Back in the inventory client update display function above where we added the comment to connect selection code, we'll check if stackdata.count equals 1, and if so, we'll set the count text's visibility to be false. This is mostly just an aesthetic thing, but it'll make so the count text only shows if there's more than 1. This feels a bit nicer for things like weapons and whatnot, which only can stack up to 1. Next, we'll create a new function called selectItem, providing the stack ID and the item frame as the parameters. We'll create a new value inside inventory client called selectedStackID, setting it to nil for now. Back where we added the to-do comment below, we'll run this new selectItem function, providing the stack data as the first argument and changing selectItem's first parameter to be stack data instead of stack ID. In selectItem, we'll set the selected stack ID value we made to the stackdata.stackID. We'll head back to the UI and find the sample image button, adding an attribute to it called normal color and setting it to be a color 3. This color will be the same as our background color 3 property, as it's the default color of the slot. We'll then add another attribute called selected color, setting it to a color 3 as well. This color will be the color of the item frames whenever they're selected, just to differentiate them. Back in the client script, we'll run a for loop through all the frames inside items SF, checking for each one that they're an image button and that they're not the sample frame. Then we'll check if the other frame we're looping through is the same frame we want to select, and if so, we'll set the other frame's background color 3 to the selected color attribute we created. If it's not the frame we want to select, we'll set the color to the normal color attribute we created instead. Then, back at the top of selectItem, where we set the inventory client.selectedStackID, we'll add an if check that checks that stack data isn't nil before trying to index it with stackID, and sets selectedStackID to nil if stack data is nil. This is so we can run selectItem, providing nil as our argument to deselect an item rather than to select one. At the bottom of selectItem, we'll check if stack data isn't nil and then set the info frames visible to true if it isn't, and to false if it is. Now we'll use our variable references we created to the info frames items to update the name and description. Now, back in inventory client.updateData, we wrote the selection code a bit wrong. Rather than selecting items right when the frame is created, we'll check when the item F image button is pressed using mouse button one click and select the item then instead. Finally, provide the item F as the second argument as I've got to earlier. Now we can see that the selection code seems to work in the inventory, and we can select the different items to view more information on each one. Next, we'll work on the equipping to hotbar portion, creating a function called equipButtonPressed in the client module. We'll head to the start function and connect this function to the equip button's mouse button one click event. Back in the UI for the inventory, we'll add a new text label inside the item info frame, naming it instructions. We'll adjust the text and position it at the bottom middle of the information frame. We'll set the text to press the slot to equip to, or the corresponding keyboard key. We'll set it up so that this text pops up whenever someone tries to equip something to the hotbar, telling them what to do so it feels easier to work with for players. Heading back to the inventory client, we'll define a variable for this new text label and set it to be invisible to start, as we only want it to show while players are equipping items to the hotbar. We'll select the equip button and add equip color and unequip color attributes to it, similar to how we did the inventory slots. We'll use these colors to adjust the equip button for unequipping as well. In the inventory server module, we'll create a new function called equip to hotbar for equipping items to the hotbar with the player and stack ID as the parameters. We'll set the variable to the player's inventory as usual and run a for loop through the player's hotbar to equip the stack if it's already in another slot. We'll check if the equipped ID is the same as the stack ID parameter, and if it is, we'll set that specific slot to be nil and unequip that item. Afterwards, we'll add another parameter to the equip to hotbar function and call it equip to, which will essentially be the slot number we want to equip the stack to. Then, after the for loop, we'll set the inventory's hotbar for that specific slot to equal the provided stack ID parameter. Then, we'll copy the code for updating the inventory on the client, as we'll add a portion to update display that updates the hotbar as well, and we want to run that. Before the for loop that removes the stack if it's already equipped, we'll add a quick double check to make sure the stack being equipped is actually in the player's inventory by looping through the current stacks and setting a boolean variable to true if a stack is found with the same stack ID as in the parameters. If that boolean variable is false, we'll return and not run the equip to hotbar code. We'll then move this validation chunk under the other for loop that removes the stacks, just so it'll remove the stack from the inventory before returning if the stack was invalid. Now we'll create another function in the inventory server for unequipping items from the hotbar, providing almost the same parameters as the equip to hotbar function, but without the equip to parameter. We'll copy the removing code we made and paste it into the unequip from hotbar function, and call the unequip from hotbar function in place of the code we had earlier for removing the stack if it exists already, as we'll set up the unequip from hotbar code to do pretty much exactly that. We'll then copy the update display signifier and paste it at the end of the unequip function as well. Down in the unregister item function, where a stack is removed from the inventory if it's made empty, we'll run the unequip from hotbar function we made earlier to unequip that stack from the hotbar if it's found, providing the player and stack ID as the arguments. Back in the unequip from hotbar function, we'll create a boolean variable called found that we set to false by default and to true if the loop finds any equipped items with a specified stack ID. We'll check if this variable is true before firing the update display function on the client, just to reduce the unnecessary fires and display updating. In the register item function, we'll set stacks to equip the hotbar automatically if there are any empty slots found. To do this, we'll run a for loop to loop through the numbers 1 through 10 and check if that specific slot is empty for each number, equipping the newly created stack if it is, and then breaking to end the loop. In the update display function on the client, we'll add a similar loop that loops from 1 to 10 and checks if that specific slot is empty. We'll then create a variable reference to the specific slot frame at the top of the for loop using our hotbar slots variable we made in one of the previous episodes. If the current slot we're looping through is empty, we'll set the count text of the hotbar slot frame to be invisible and set the image to be an empty string. Then we'll create an else portion for if the slot isn't empty, and find the stack based on the equipped stack ID by looping through all the stacks in the client's version of the inventory. To check if the current stack we're looping through in the inventory is the same as the equipped one in the hotbar, we'll create a variable reference to the hotbar's stack ID at the top to make things easier, replacing the first part of the if statement with our new variable and using it to check if the current stack we're looping through in the inventory is the same one that's in the hotbar, setting the found stack variable to that stack if it is. After finding the stack data from the ID, we'll adjust the count text to match found stack's count value. We'll also adjust the image to match the stack's image and create an if statement checking if the count is 1 and setting it to be invisible if it is, just like when we were creating the frames in the inventory, but also setting the count to be visible if it's more than 1, since we'll be working with the same hotbar slots for multiple different stacks that could be equipped rather than creating a new frame each time like in the inventory. Testing it, we get an error saying that found stack is nil in our updating hotbar portion of the update display function, which we'll fix in a second. During testing to fix this issue, I realized that I added slot 0 to the hotbar slots table twice, so I'll remove that. But the reason we're getting this error is because we forgot to check if the stack was actually found before trying to update the slot frame to match the found stack. If the stack wasn't found, we'll copy the code from the portion that removes the image and count if there isn't an item in that slot. Testing it again, we can see that we don't get the error anymore, and the inventory client, when printing its data, even shows that the items were automatically equipped to the hotbar, but they don't display properly in the hotbar frames. After a bit of experimentation on my end, I eventually noticed an issue in the server module's getInventoryJSON function, where the stack ID of the adjusted stacks was being sent to stackdata.lastStackID, which doesn't exist in the stack and is thus nil, rather than stackdata.stackID. Fixing that, we can see the items auto-equipped to the hotbar and that they properly display there now. If we remove the items from the inventory, we can also see them disappearing from the hotbar as well, which seems to be correct. To simplify our code, we'll create a function in inventory client to find a stack based on the stack's ID, like we did in the hotbar portion of update display. We'll cut that portion from the update display function, replacing it with a new function we made, and pasting the copied code into that function, returning stack data rather than setting it to a variable. This will let us run the same code for finding stacks later on without having to type it all out again. Above the select item function, we'll create a new function called setEquipButton with one parameter for what to set it to, with true being equip and false being unequip. If toSet is true, we'll set the text to equip and set the background color 3 to the attribute we made earlier. We'll do the same if toSet is false by setting it to unequip and the unequip color attribute instead. At the bottom of the select item function, we'll loop through all the stack IDs in the hotbar and check if they're the currently selected stack or not. This basically tells us whether or not the item is already equipped. We'll create a Boolean variable at the top called isEquipped, setting it to false to start and to true if the selected stack is found in the hotbar. Then we'll run the setEquip button function we created with the argument not isEquipped, which essentially flips isEquipped, sending true if the item isn't already equipped and sending false if it is. Now, if we test the game and select the items, you'll notice the button shows unequip and turns red because all of the items are already equipped. Now we can head back to the equip button pressed function from earlier to actually set up the equipping and unequipping. We'll first check if the equip button's text is equal to equip or unequip to essentially determine what functionality we want the button to have for that click. If it's set to equip, we'll set the instructions text we added to be visible and set the equip button's text to something random that displays the equip is in process. We'll add a check to make sure the selected item ID isn't nil, so that way we don't try equipping something when nothing is selected. Then, at the top of the equipping portion, we'll find the stack data from the currently selected stack ID using the findStackDataFromID function we made earlier. At the bottom of the equip portion, we'll check the item's type to see if it's an armor item or something else, and if it's an armor item, we want to give a warning for now because we'll implement that in a later episode. If it's a non-armor item, we'll create a nil variable called chosenSlot, which we'll set to whichever slot the player chooses later on. At the top of our code, under our hotbar slots variable, we'll create a new variable called keysToSlots, using the key codes as the indexes and the hotbar slot frames as the values, lining them up with whatever buttons you want PC users to press to equip that slot. Back in the equipping portion, we'll create a new janitor object called tempJanitor. For anyone who hasn't used my janitor module before, or anything like various different made modules I've seen, this module has two main functions, giveChore and clean. You can give a janitor object various chores, such as Roblox event connections, objects like parts, animations, etc., and when you run the clean function, it will loop through all those chores and do them, which is different based on what each chore actually is. For connections, it disconnects them, whereas for other objects and instances, it destroys them. We'll give our new janitor a chore and provide uis.inputBegan_connect as the argument. In the inputBegan event, we'll return if gameProcessed event is true, and then run a for loop through the keysToSlots table to check the input. If the input's key code is equal to the key in the keysToSlots table, we'll set the chosenSlot variable to the slot frame in keysToSlots, and then run the janitor's clean method, which will disconnect the connection so we don't listen to any future inputs after this one. Finally, we'll return to stop the loop and end the function we connected to inputBegan. At the top of our code, we'll insert a new value into the inventory client module called equipInstructText, which will set to be the instructText starting text. This is so we can change the text on an invalid input to show the user that the equip was cancelled and easily change the text back to the proper text later on when it pops up next. After the loop that checks all the keys, we'll set the instructee's text to error not a valid key, and then wait for 2 seconds, setting the text back to the default from our value we created and making the instructee invisible as well. Finally, we'll make the janitor clean here as well to cancel the equip and disconnect the input event. Finally, we'll double check that the input's userInputType property is equal to enum.userInputType.keyboard so that inputs like clicking or tapping the screen on mobile won't cancel the input. Now we'll set up the mobile support portion, looping through all the hotbar slots in the hotbar slots table, giving the tempJanitor another chore, providing slotf.mousebutton1clickConnect as the argument this time. Now we'll do essentially the same thing as before, setting the chosenSlot variable to the slot that was pressed and then cleaning the janitor's chores to disconnect all the connections and stop listening to any of the inputs. In the inventory server module, we'll listen to another signal event called inventory equip to hotbar, connecting it to the equip to hotbar function. We'll set up another for the unequip from hotbar function. This will let us run these functions from the client. After connecting all the inputs that let the user pick the slot to equip to, we'll fire the server's equip to hotbar function to equip the chosen slot. Before this, however, we'll need to make sure to repeatedly wait until chosen slot is not nil before trying to equip the item to that slot. Making some small adjustments, we'll move the tempJanitor variable outside the if statement that checks if the item type is armor, just so we can use it outside the non-armor equipping portion as well. After setting the instructVisible property to true, we'll give the tempJanitor a function chore that sets instructVisible back to false. We'll do the same thing with the equip button text, setting it back to equip. Back in the keyboard input detection portion, we'll give the tempJanitor yet another chore, setting the instructText back to the default text, and removing the portion we had that reset it earlier, as it will now be reset whenever we run the janitor's clean method instead. After waiting for the user to select a slot, we'll need to find the slot number based on the slot frame. We can do this by first setting a slot num variable to nil, and then looping through our hotbar slots table, checking for each hotbar slot if it's equal to the chosen slot. If it is, we'll set slot num to be I, which is the slot number in this case. If it finds the slot number, we'll break to end the loop. Then, back in our Fire server to the equip.hotbar function, we'll provide the slot num and the stackdata.stackid as the arguments into the equipping function. Before we actually test it, however, we'll need to set up the unequipping portion, as all the items start out being equipped already, thanks to our code from earlier. In the unequipped portion of the code, we'll simply fire the server to run the unequip from hotbar function, providing the stackdata.stackid as the only argument, and moving the stackdata variable outside the if statement so both the equip and unequip portions can use it. Right here, I forgot to remove the old stackdata variable, but you'll probably want to since it's just extra code we don't need. Additionally, to make our equipping code just a little bit simpler, we'll create a second variable under chosen slot called slot num, setting it to nil to start as well. We'll keep our for loop that finds the slot number, but we'll put it inside an if statement so that it only runs if there isn't already a slot num provided. In the button pressing portion, we'll then set slot num to be I as we loop through each button. Testing it now, we can see that pressing unequip seems to work, though it doesn't update the equip button, and so does the equipping portion, besides a few bugs which we'll likely fix next episode. Though I hate to stop the hotbar scripting short, this video is getting to be the longest thus far, and so I'll leave it off here. The hotbar is largely functional already, but do note that I am aware of some of the funky bugs there are with the equipping code right now, and that I'll be fixing them in the episodes to come. Thanks for watching as always, and of course, if you're wanting access to the completed files for this video series, you can always become a channel member yourself for only $2.99 a month, and gain access to that and more. Nonetheless, thank you for watching and supporting my channel's growth, and I'll see you guys next time.